Elevator put in one.
$6, we'll go ahead and call ourselves to order. Sorry for the peril. I was on the baseball field like 10 minutes ago. Had to be Lucy. I'd like to welcome everybody to our regular scheduled meeting for the month of March. Yes, sound staff, council. Brown. Everybody had a chance to look over the agenda.
I make a motion to adopt the agenda as is.
I'll second.
All in favor? Right. Public comment. We got Mr. Danny McIntosh signed up first to discuss landscaping.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff, and lots of folks here. This looks good. I think where y'all gonna get a landscaping update, and it reminded me of something I think that's probably worth taking note of. Had a terrible accident over in Mitchell County a little earlier this year at the V Garland Road. When you pull up to the stop sign at V Garland Road, you're looking straight across two lanes to a wall with broom, sage, and weeds at this time. I hope they'll do something with that. But there's not a one-way sign there or anything. You're just looking into that broom sage. Lady pulled up that stop sign, made a left turn, got straightened up in the road to what I'm sure she believed to be her side of the highway, and the accident happened. I believe the young man's name was Josh Watson, had his family with him, and don't have time to get into all of that. He was killed. So that's one thing to take into consideration. When you get to looking, there's a lot of places you pull up that stop sign and there's no sign that said one way points that way. So I see where that's easy accidents to happen. Second incident happened to me about 3:30 down at the tobacco store, because I was coming from Spruce Pine today. And that was, I was in the left-hand lane, lady pulling out of the tobacco store to enter into 19E. And instead of making her right turn on the, what I would call her side of the road, she came right on across it with my side. So after the collision, I took a ride out through the middle of the grassy median for some 150 feet or something like that. So I guess I'd say at that point, substantially sized trees probably have no place in the median. So there are two things I wish y'all would consider when you go to considering landscape. I still got a minute left, Brian. I'll be done next month. I won't, so just suffice it to say, thank y'all for being here. I appreciate what you do.
Thank you, Danny. Next up, we have Miss Lucy Dahl to discuss streetlights.
Bunch of you have heard this a bunch of times, and because I've been making the overbright lights that are lighting up our yards, our houses, and sometimes our rooms on Summit Street. And last time I talked to Tracy Evans, who's just lovely, he said, well, the town tells us what to do. And I did a little fact checking on that, and apparently that's a fuzzy area. And I just need to know exactly how to do this, because I've been up here before and I've got it all memorized and y'all know it. So it's just like, how do we get lights that actually light up the streets and not our properties and our porches, which we can't enjoy in the evenings because there's like prison lights shining down on us. And Phil and Audrey Smith hated that new LED that was supposed to be facing down. It lit up in front of their porch. They could not enjoy it. And now the people they sold the house to, same thing. He built that beautiful pergola in the front, you know, because there wasn't a porch there, and they can't enjoy it. So how can we stop lighting up our porches? Just keep the light on the street. Is it the town, as Tracy says, or is it him, which I've heard from a couple of you? What do we do?
Do you want me to address what I know, or do you?
You can,
want me to-
yes.
Or let's see if you want to give me a call,
Okay,
and we can talk tomorrow about the agreement. Is the agreement with the town and French Broad.
thanks.
Okay, you get a call tomorrow, we'll figure it out.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lucy. That sums up the public comment section. Everybody had a chance to read over the minutes for the month of February.
I make a motion we approve the February minutes.
No second.
All in favor?
Uh,
Motion carries. Public hearings. New subdivision ordinance draft. Have a staff report on that.
Together report on that. You also received a copy of that. The planning board met and made a recommendation. Then there was a slight addendum or revision to a particular part of that text concerning stormwater with smaller subdivisions working in an exception. They met on that, the planning board met on that Monday, made a recommendation that the proposed revisions to our subdivision ordinance that we are considering tonight with that small change be their recommendation going forward. They did want me to note that there is some language in there about steeper slopes. They wanted to let the board know that that is something that some type of looking into steep slope regulation in general is a project they may be taking on in the future to see if there's things that may apply. But that's down the road. For tonight is just the ordinance revisions that you've been sent, with the only change being that email that went out with the minor change, putting in an exception for smaller subdivisions tonight to go through the full process of the Department of Environmental Quality review of those. So that is that's what you all are considering tonight, those that document.
Thank you, Brian. So I guess we need to open up the public hearing. We have a motion to open up the public hearing.
I make,
so,
Oh, sorry, Irene.
I'll second.
All in favor? We did have a sign up, right?
Yeah.
Danny McIntosh has signed up to speak on that.
Oh, it's public here, somebody who's needs to.
Your name's on any of them.
Take your blessing where you find. The planning commission had an interesting discussion, a couple of things in that text we're considering. And one of them, as I understand it, is a development now up to 5 acres in size can be done without any oversight or intervention or whatever by DEQ. Is that right?
That's the way the
They're
language.
going to have to submit the stormwater plan. Now, they still have to submit. an
The erosion control.
plan. Those all have, no matter if you start an acre, those have to be
To
submitted.
DEQ.
Yeah, but they still have to have an engineer the stormwater.
Now, my thought about that was, well, first of all, is the engineer going to be supplied by the town or supplied by the developer?
By the developer, should be.
So the
Yeah.
developer's engineer is and they're engineers, they're not gonna risk their license, certainly, that's not gonna happen. But who are they working for? They're working for the developer. And my thought was, there's not very many 5-acre tracts or larger in town at this point. But about what we got left is steep slope. The steep slope is what this thing doesn't look at. But if the town were to develop or allow development of a 5-acre tract, and somehow or other, something happened with that plan, and the town allowed to be created a problem for some downstream neighbors. And then DEQ comes along and says, wow, y'all built something here, that's not working out good, you're flooding your neighbors out down here. And now it's up to the town to fix it, the developer long gone. And so that was my thought at that time, was 5 acres is a pretty good size. You go put 3 houses on an acre, 15 houses, that's a lot. You have a lot of curbing and drainage and all of that. Anyway, that was my thought about the 5 acres. Yeah, I just wish the town would not allow somebody to do something, and then here comes the DEQ and says, hey, now that's on you, since you allowed that to be created. So, is the thought. And again, I appreciate what y'all do.
Thank you, Dan. I'll make a motion to go out of. No, that's not signed up. Do I have a motion to go out of the public hearing?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Favor. All right. So, we don't have no comment here. That's for that, right? So it's you. All right, so now we need council's considerations, to make a motion, vote on this, subdivision ordinance as presented. Any discussion on the board?
I'm good with it. I'll make the motion.
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries. All right. Moving on to the next item, which is B under public hearings, parking zoning ordinance text amendment. Again, I'll yield Brian for the staff report.
Real quickly, this is, again, this was made as a recommendation by the planning board. Been more than to review, and they recommend approval of this. This is changing, as we look through our, design standards and our zoning ordinance for, parking requirements. The parking requirement for an ABC retail establishment was higher than it was for a regular retail, quite a bit, and that became an issue. I know the ABC store is, looking to develop a new property, and it might be prohibitive for them, but we couldn't seem to find a good justification for why that requirement would be higher than normal retail for an ABC establishment, to have them require more parking spaces than you would any other type of retail establishment. So the recommendation was to change that text to make that requirement the same as it is for all other retail, all other forms of retail.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Yes.
I did not think this before, but Bill has.
I'll be abstaining from that
We'll
vote.
have.
Yes.
And we'll need a motion and a vote from your end. So from the vote, when you get to that.
Okay. Thanks, Ed. So do I have a motion to go into the public hearing on this topic?
Second.
All right. Mr. Danny McIntosh again, you might as well stand up then.
As far as what you vote on, I'm for it. I think there's a couple of things you might need to consider, and I guess the reason I'm for it is people don't waste a lot of time in liquor stores. Going down to Denise's shoe store where you're gonna look around for a while, so I don't see that as kind of a problem. And I certainly haven't seen the designs on that. There's a couple of things I think probably should be considered. One is, since the state of North Carolina has allowed side-by-sides on the road, maybe you could put in a couple of side-by-side parking spots, sized, somewhere there, or golf cart, or whatever, we'll get back to that. We won't worry about that right now. The other thing I thought about is, I don't know it's gonna be designed, but a lot of places configured in a lot such as that down there might have you turn in the back from the store, wherever the parking is, and that be a dead end, to where when you went in that way, you had to come out that way, like the Dollar Tree over the Weaver building before they built the, Hobby Lobby. You went in that parking lot, you had to come back out of that parking lot. And if somebody figured that thing with the driveway around it, if somebody's coming by with their horse trailer or the motorcycle trailer or the side-by-side trailer or whatever, they could get around the building and get back out into the road rather than having to park in the street or trying to maneuver around within the parking lot. So that's just a couple of thoughts. Like I said, I'm for it. I don't see any problem changing that, requirement.
Danny, I think they're gonna also be able to go out through, Fast Stop too.
Well, and you can go in front of the auto zone and come out through the
Yeah.
right stop, and then you can go in behind. That's pretty neat how they did all of that. Just make it there where people lack the building. Maybe, I don't know what kind of constraints you're under, what kind of unloading dock you have to design or any of that.
A lot of people will be parking at Pizza Hut.
Well, very well could be.
Probable.
But best of all in your design.
Thanks, Dan. Have a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make the motion.
All in favor?
Uh,
Right, so now we need to make a motion to accuse Bill, is that correct?
Yeah. Bill, your key.
I'll make that motion.
No second.
All right, so,
All in favor?
yes,
Uh,
yes. All right. Consideration of adoption of zoning text amendments for the parking zoning ordinance. Have a motion to approve that.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Randy, you in favor?
Yes.
All in favor? Motion carries. All right, we have one more public hearing, Tony Ford zoning map amendment.
Okay, and Mr. Ford is here, so if there's any particular questions, that anyone have him for the later time, but this lot is located, if you're not familiar, it's the wedge piece where Reservoir Road and Bowditch Street meet. It's that wedge piece of property. The property set vacant as far back as we can find. I don't know if anything's ever been developed. It's never been assigned a 911 address because there's never anything developed on that property. Mr. Ford is looking to have that rezoned to be commercial. It's currently zoned residential. And he can explain this better than I can, but he's looking maybe to sell the property to someone who would develop it. That's his hope. The property on the front two sides is abutted by C2. Both those are commercial developments in the front. In the rear, it is in the rear and off to kind of one side, it is abutted by residential property. So it does have a commercial abutment. Planning board has met with this. They did vote in favor. Some of those discussions were around the fact that it has sat vacant and that it is abutted by commercial property. There was some hesitation that they wanted me to mention that with the topography, that it was sort of set by itself. It wasn't necessarily as joined to those commercial properties as it was, but they still voted, I believe it was 4-1 in favor of doing the MAC amendment and changing this to C2.
What is the acreage?
Pardon?
What is the acreage?
Right at 8.9.
It's almost 9 acres, right at an acre.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. I need a motion to go into public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Chief.
Second.
You're welcome.
All in favor? All right, I'm not even gonna look, I'm gonna say it's Danny's.
I'm telling you, I'm thinking,
One of them.
this is just
She asked you to say.
this is your opportunity right here. This is a level lot with basically sets level street access on both sides. Or there, I think commercial is it's certainly its highest and best use. And I don't believe, given the nature of the stores that are there and the truck trailer traffic, it has to go up by it to access the back of the grocery store and Rosie's. That, you know, whatever lawful business you would put in there would cause a problem. Given the town's current guidelines. People can complain about anything, I'm sure whatever's going on there, somebody's going to complain about it. But I think it's very well suited.
Thank you, Dana. Do I have a motion to go out of closed, or out of the public hearing?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All in favor? I'll make a motion to approve that.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor? Any discussion?
And I live on that street.
Well, very good. I think that's all of our public hearing. It was. Sorry, am I going too fast? Sorry, just slow me down, Chad. I am. Sorry, baseball game.
Yeah. I had-
All right, we'll move on to Ms. Michelle Ball. I think her presentation.
I'm here again about the CDBG project. Hopefully one of the last things you're all gonna have to adopt to get the money released on this project. But this is the Fair Housing Analysis of Impediments. It's a study, I had to do a study and examine several different things in town to see, basically to look at the fair housing and examine the town demographics. And just to give you a couple of instances, the population in town decreased in 2020 from 2010, about 4.67%. The median age actually went up. It's 42.9 is the median age in town. Then employment rates are lower than both the town and the county and the state, but the household median incomes are much lower with with the towns being $34,659, the county's being about $42,000, and the state being at $54,000 per household. Also looked at the housing profile. The town, this is higher than both the state and the county. The town has 43.6% of its homes built before 1970. That means almost half the homes in town are 50 years or older. And it's split nearly in half rentals and owner occupied homes. About 66% of the homes in town are single family. And this is the most recent, I'm sure a lot of you won't be surprised with this. This is per realty.com. The median listing price for a home in Burnsville for February 2022, $399,800. But that's happening everywhere. Also had to look at environmental justice to see if there were concentrations of low income pockets or minority pockets. The town is actually considered per the US Census to have a low income population, where the low and moderate income population of the town is 55.67%, which if you're over 50% is considered a low and moderate income town, at least for some of the projects that we work with. We looked at the zoning, which so far is so new that it's not affecting anything with the housing, I hope. And there was also in 2018 for another project, a fair housing survey was conducted. And that's attached with all the comments, and all of the results are also attached to this plan. But basically what we had to do, like I said, what I had to do is kind of look to see what the barriers to fair housing were by looking at these demographics and this information. And number one right now is affordability of housing in Burnsville, Yancey County, really North Carolina right now. And the lack of affordable housing in town, especially for low and moderate income persons. You know, it's almost impossible for them to purchase a home at this point. However, there's nothing fair housing wise that we can do about it. Second barrier is just awareness of fair housing. And with this project, the town conducts and I do basically conduct quarterly activities to promote. Sometimes it's an advertisement, sometimes it's we might try to have some kind of we'll have to have some kind of public, meeting about fair housing. I've done that once or twice out at the senior center, with other projects and, ads in the paper, brochures, things in the library, things at the town hall to try to make posters, to try to make people aware of fair housing. And the third was really education on home buyers or how to buy a house. And part of the activities do include home buyer information, particularly from HUD, but also from other sources that I can find out there. And we try to provide that information again in the town hall libraries or, online. Sometimes we are able to put it on a website. So this is a required document that needs to be adopted and turned into, DEQ before the end of the month for us to get a bunch of these. So I'm hoping that, that's what you'll do.
Thank you, Michelle. As always, appreciate what you do for
If
the
y'all
town.
have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Have a motion to adopt that document.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye. All right, moving on to item number 6. Our agenda is Ms. Heather Hockaday's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight, I wanted to do a, discussion about the ARPA grant funding. It's coming down through the state, in different packages, I guess. There's several pots of money. These aren't all of them. These are just the 3 that we're currently dealing with right now. ARPA stands for the American Rescue Plan Act. It's federal law that was passed last year to provide fiscal recovery money to local governments and states all over the United States. So I wanted to talk to you about 3 pots of money that we are working with at this time. I'm gonna let Chad get you guys on the PowerPoint. We provided, because as of yet, we don't have the capability to project all this stuff out to you guys, but picked up one of these.
I don't know how to go.
We're basically just gonna go through point by point.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, as you can see by the graphic there, the 3 pots that we're talking about are the federal ARPA allocations to NEUs. We are a non-entitlement unit across the United States. You are categorized by population. Anything under 50,000 people in the population is considered a non-entitlement unit. And all municipalities and counties, local governments, tribal units receive direct allocations through the ARPA fund, ARPA Act. And ours, because we are a non-entitlement unit in North Carolina, went through the state into their North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office. And it will be distributed in 2 tranches. The first one, I'll get to that in a second. These were direct federal funds. That pot was a direct federal fund. The second pot of money that we are looking at receiving some funding from is the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. So that is money that came from the Treasury down to the states. And then the state of North Carolina has distributed that through a plan. And basically, the bulk of it came through the recent North Carolina state budget that they passed. Some of it went into state agencies, some of it went to the university systems, some of it came into localities, communities through direct earmarked allocations, And then, some of it will be sent out into other state agencies to disperse. Yancey County received, some funding directly through the budget. The third pot is, that we're looking at is, grant and loan funding through the Department of Environmental Quality. And those are grants and loans that are specific to water and wastewater projects. All right, you go to the next page. We'll talk about the first one. I gave you a little overview. The money came from the federal treasury down to the states. The North Carolina Pro organization or office, and then they directed those funds through to us. We got our first tranche last June. The total amount that of our allocation, and again, it's based on population, is $524,000. So half of that we received in June of 2021. We are expecting the other half to come in June of this year. All of these funds must be spent for ARPA eligible projects. And they also have to be authorized, the spending has to be authorized by state law. And the funds have to be obligated for expenditure by December 31st of 2024. Meaning you have to have contracts and projects in the works. And then all funds have to be fully spent by December 31st of 2026. Oh. Okay, so to spend those funds that were more direct ARP funds, we have to have a defined project. The project must be ARP or state fiscal recovery fund eligible, authorized by state law again, and the local government must follow both federal and state compliance requirements. So what are the categories? Categories are something that will address open public health and negative economic impact, replace lost revenue, premium pay for essential workers like healthcare workers, and then infrastructure, investing in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. Treasury's final rule came down on January the 6th. And the school of government has been basically following this since the beginning. We've been having classes and meetings about it and putting out blog posts about it. And their recommendation after the final rule came out is to use your replacement of lost revenue category. And the reason for that is the final rule allowed all local government units that receive less than $10 million to take what's called a standard allowance. So basically you can take anything that's less than $10 million that you receive through this funding and put it into any type of general government services. Now, if you put it into a project, you're going to have to follow all those federal procurement rules. So what has been recommended is to maximize your funds using the revenue replacement option. And what you do with that is you replace the general government expense, because it's not going to require as much federal oversight or hoops to jump through if you put it in salaries and benefits of employees. Then you free up that general fund money that you would have allocated towards that expense, and you can use that to do whatever type of projects you want to do. And it can be anything that local governments are allowed by state and federal law to do. So it doesn't have to be one of these categories. It can be something else. But you're only going to have to follow your state procurement rules if you basically substitute your ARP funds for your general expenditure funds that come out of the tax. No, that's because it's taking 7 classes. And we're still doing, I didn't know one today, and people still have questions. And we're not ready yet because we're waiting on more, information to come down from the school government to making final decisions on doing this, but this is certainly, as far as, procurement things that you have to jump through and broadening the array of projects that you could use this money for, this is what they recommend. This is the path they recommend. Okay. Skip to the next page, about the coronavirus state and local business. I came through the state budget. $13 million was allocated to Yancey County specifically for water and wastewater construction projects in the near term. In discussions with the county, as you know, they have said that they would allocate $3 million of that $13 million to the town for wastewater repairs out of the wastewater treatment. That these funds are subject to not only the federal and the state and local procurement guidelines, but whatever guidelines the Department of Environmental Quality DEQ. So we are still waiting. I did a training last Monday with DEQ. They have not published their final procurement policy. And we're still waiting on some information from them about how we make this whole process work. It will probably have to be an agreement between us and the county. And I think Donnie and I have been talking about that. We have a draft, but we're also waiting on the school government and DEQ to get their guidance so that we're not coming back to you guys time and time again with amendments to this agreement. So that's exciting news for us particularly. We certainly appreciate the county's willingness to share.
So and this may be a Jamie question that he may or may not be able to answer, but the 10 million that they're left with has to be spent specifically on water and wastewater?
Yes, they received other allocations for other projects they have, but it has to be specifically spent on water or wastewater construction projects. That's how it was allocated to DEQ. So basically, there's a form that the county fills out to DEQ once they have a project, then DEQ does an analysis of the project to make sure it fits an eligible use of the funding, and then DEQ will issue what's called an intent to fund letter and let them know that they can proceed with the project. The issue that is holding a lot of this up, and I know, people have complained and said, why is this money being spent out, is that the federal procurement process is so intensive and restrictive. And you have to make sure you are dotting every I and crossing every T in every step of the way. Because if you mess up, then they're going to come back in an audit and say, give us this money back. So you don't want to make a mistake. So that's the process that every municipality in the state of North Carolina, the county in the state of North Carolina, and really across the country is working with. Leslie today was able to finally get us logged into the portal system that Treasury's put up. And it was, she had to give them blood. I know the Red Cross is here. But there was the whole thing about how they had to scan her face. They have to have her driver's license. And it's just that portal, that whole process has been, there's been a lot of complaints about it. But they're very particular about how these funds are going to get spent and making sure everything is done right. I don't think our first report is due until April 30th. So every quarter from now on, and then probably 5 years past the December of 2026, we're going to have to report as to where these funds are and what we bought with these funds are. So it's a big thing, particularly for smaller communities like ours, even smaller. There was one lady I felt so sorry for. She said, we only got $20,000. It's gonna cost us $50,000 in consulting fees to.
Keep up with it, yeah.
So. So the next slide is also through the state budget. State allocated a very large pot of money to the Department of Environmental Quality for their grant and loan program. Those applications are due May 2nd. Michelle was just here. Shane and I had a meeting with her 2 hours before this meeting to talk about what projects are on our current capital improvement list that she thinks will score well under the state's scoring guidelines. And that was part of she was also at a training last week about these applications. So we're looking at what projects on our current CIP list will score best for grant applications. There is also a possibility, we will submit an application to have the loan that we applied for last April for improvements at the water treatment plant to be converted into a grant. They are doing that. So we're hopeful that, that will be approved. As long as you haven't spent any of the money yet out of the loan, we haven't, because we're just going for the LPC April 5th. So we're hoping that we can get that replaced with grant money, which will be a huge help. Michelle has determined that we have enough qualifications to get criteria of being at-risk community. DEQ's plan basically has 3 levels. One is for communities that are on the non-viable list, meaning they're distressed. Usually those are the ones that have a lot of financial issues going on. And that's a totally separate state designation. Then there are those who have smaller numbers of end user connections and some other scoring factors that can be on the at risk. And what that does is open up a larger problem. If you're in the other category, you're only allowed to get grants up to $5 million loans out of this number. So, it's a good thing to be considered as an at-risk community because you're eligible for up to 15 million. If the county funds us 3 million of their money, then we would only be eligible for 12 million. We have lots of projects that we're evaluating those as we get it.
And Michelle felt pretty good about their chances, didn't she?
About as far as being at
At
risk.
risk.
She had the scoring sheet with her today, and she had stayed around, asked for show it to you, but she felt like we met the criteria.
It's great.
Because it's based on residential connections, so that would fit. And if you qualify on the sewer side, you're qualified. You don't have to qualify on both water and sewer.
So I'm sure we qualify. Yeah.
So I feel like we will be able to apply. And I did ask them, is the state going to put out a list of at-risk communities? And they said, no, you have to evaluate it yourself.
Yeah.
And send us in the information. So our roadmap going forward, more continuing ed. I think I'll have an online class maybe 4. Leslie will have one for finance officers on April 11th. I'll continue every week. They're doing office hours. The school government staff, League of Municipalities is involved, and the County Commissioners Association is involved too. They have staff, so they do an hour to an hour and a half every week on topics. One thing we're very excited about is the school government has just stood up a new website where they are listing all of the policies we have to adopt, and they have templates for most of them. Some of them we have already adopted. There will be more coming. And then we'll continue working on this issue of the interlocal agreement with Yancey County. So we'll figure out how those funds are going to flow. All of DEQ's money is on a reimbursement basis, which was a big shock to me. you get a loan and they don't give you the money. They hold the money and then you pay for what you're doing as the invoices come in, and then Shell submits the invoices and then they reimburse you for the money. So it's gonna be going from us up to the county, up to DEQ, and then back down. But usually they're pretty good about doing that in time. There will be project ordinances, probably for multiple projects. Certainly for the ones that we spend out of the first block, which is our money that came directly to us. And then there'll be project ordinances for anything we do with the DEQ money. And this is only the beginning. I'm going to focus really strongly here on water and wastewater, because that is crucial, vital, the biggest service we provide, and in desperate need of a lot of attention. But there are other state agencies that receive funding, and they're going to be releasing grants later on in the year. One of them I've talked to High Country about is a rural transformation grant for rural areas, or downtowns and things like that. I think, the Department of Commerce, I think those grants are going to be starting maybe in July of this year. So we don't have a lot of information about that, but we do know that we'll have funding. So, I mean, all of these grants certainly are going to be competitive, but there's a whole lot of money. So we hope that we can get our share.
Cross your fingers.
And I just want to give you that.
That's a great report on
That
that.
was-
Got any questions? I know it's a lot and and I went through it kind of fast, but, you know, Tom, this evening, I'll tell you what I'm not. The next item I have is revisiting our Brunchville ordinance. Last meeting, we had some comment on that presentation, and that instructed me to,
Do we need to take it?
Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry, did I skip one? Yes, I did.
Yep.
We need to table, the NCDOT. We don't have any finalized plans. Show you tonight on what they want to do. They have plans to make some adjustments. Apparently, I've had discussion with some of the engineers this week. And certainly by the April meeting, we should have something to actually have a discussion about and look at. So moving on to three, Brunchville ordinance. The ordinance is prepared and just ready for you all to take action.
Any discussion on that? I have a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Uh,
Carries.
Okay. The next item is the town center lease for Area C. That lease is up April 1st. Remax, they have approached us and would like to enter into a new one-year term lease. And I would just need for you all to, I guess, instruct me to prepare the lease agreement, and authorize the mayor to enter into it. It's been a good, I think, Corbin stated it's been a good relationship.
Yeah, I mean, they don't really bother me a whole lot, they're really good to work with, really nice people, and I mean, it goes well.
And the income has been good considering what we've had, you know, with COVID. A lot of installations. We expect that to pick up, but as Corbin said, that it doesn't really affect anything we're doing here. And the monthly rental on that is $1,200 a month. I'll leave it up to you to make any changes or adjustments if you want.
So that's the same thing it is currently,
That's what it is.
and Michelle just reported the cost of housing went way up.
Yeah.
So does the lease need to go up?
You know, I don't think it would be unreasonable to say, you know, a slight increase in that, you know. But
15?
it is a, you know, it's a commercial lease, not a residential one, so. I think it's unreasonable. I don't know that they would be amenable to that, certainly. That's what you want us to do.
It's a square
What's
foot.
square footage on that, Chad? You know, it's I was just curious.
And Heather, has there been any other interest from anyone, another business wanting to rent that at all, or?
I don't think
Not
we've
at
had
this time?
Anybody has made any.
Mhm.
I mean, we haven't marketed it either because they're there, so,
The 12/12 is 14/4,
yes.
15.
How many, oh, he's want to look for square footage?
Yeah.
Mhm.
We'll let Corbin give us the square footage.
One good thing about them though, I will say, and I think Chad will, can correct me if I'm wrong, but they didn't do any real alterations to the building.
No, they haven't changed anything at all. Which reminds, how much? 11. So,
$100.
Usually $100 square foot, right?
yeah,
But
I just hate to set precedents too much and raise it. Too much.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Because then what if?
I will
Person
say, that we did that because it's all on the single meter, is, water. And the, electricity, water and electricity is also.
Which they're,
what kind of increase we gonna see in the power bill?
Do what?
What kind of increase are gonna be in the power bill?
I
Later.
think it's been very negative. I mean, I don't see any increases.
Just a little too high, but it's not in that. I can tell.
yeah, and they're not a water user, so
They don't-
you
Yeah.
won't see.
I'll make a motion that you negotiate with them and see what they say.
Mhm.
And you're thinking in the, it's somewhere between.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a thing in the world that went up $100.
There's a motion.
Have a second.
I'd like to keep it the same for one more year.
yeah, I mean, we're still kind
Good
of
thing.
under COVID, so I'd say for one more year, keep it the same. Anyway,
So you made a motion, Randy made a motion to negotiate,
Yeah.
you made a motion to keep it the same.
What we need to do.
Yeah, mine didn't get a
second.
I didn't get a, yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Denise can make another motion.
I'll make a motion to keep it the same for one more year.
You second.
I'll second, yeah.
So we need, I guess we need to vote on.
Okay, all in favor of keeping it the same?
Uh,
Okay. And also I need a motion to authorize the mayor to sign the invoice.
I'll make that motion.
It's gonna be before we come back. Yeah.
Agree.
Moving on, the five pedestrian steering committee. First steering committee meeting will be held here at the town center on March 25th. That will be a public meeting, notice this meeting, since it's a committee of this board. It's a hybrid meeting with, there'll be some virtual participants and some in person. The staff, we got a meeting with the consulting firm, VDH. They're primarily out of Charlotte, we're still working with them. And they seemed like they were ready to go, have been gathering a lot of information about from our previous pedestrian plans. They asked a lot of good questions. Additional meeting will follow, I think mainly what this, first steering committee meeting, I know Denise is on the committee, it's just gonna be a, kind of get to know you and what our procedure is and what our steps are. And there'll be other meetings where they'll take a lot more input, I think, from the steering. So if you guys have any questions about that, we can.
Is that appropriate place to get French broad on those, lighting up those crosswalks?
I don't know about this first meeting, maybe, but I know that as we move along, that would be something that we could say we would like to have incorporated.
Right, I mean, Lucy's kind of have to turn them off and I'm on to turn them on. At least those three crosswalks, before somebody gets killed.
Right. Item 6 on the agenda. Last meeting, we talked about, some previous amendments to the employee handbook regarding vacation hours, vacation time. And I kind of wanted to give sort of a brief, history to our new members and remind our old members that, and Liz may help me out on this a little bit. In June of 2021, the council adopted some changes to the employee handbook. One of them was to roll over any accrued vacation hours above 160 hours into the employee's sick leave, that they be allowed to recoup as time counted toward retirement and state retirement. If an employee had worked for the town for 10 or more years, they earn 160 hours of vacation time throughout the year, and it accrues each 2-week pay period again. So if you don't take any vacation, and then you've got 160. Obviously, the old provision that each year in January, an employee could roll over up to 240 hours of vacation. So a 10-year employee could have 240 hours banked, gain another 160 throughout the year, and take 400 hours of vacation time during. Now nobody does that. So that's why they have some banked and left over. But they do hold on to these bank hours if they separate from the town for any reason, retirement or any other reason, then the town pays out those hours in cash. So over the next 8 to 10 years, we've been talking about this with our post-retirement benefit funds. We're going to have more than probably a quarter of our workforce be eligible. Most of these employees will receive lifetime post-retirement benefits from the town. Rolling those hours of 60 into sick time over that period of time would save the town for the unused vacation hours that are being done. Additionally, it benefits the employee to have the additional 80 hours roll over into sick time. It would take an employee approximately 10 months of work to accrue that many hours towards their retirement. So, and I think Leslie had calculated that each additional year worked, your retirement benefit increases by an estimated 5%. When the council adopted this provision to try to be fair to the employees who had bank time above that 160 hours above at that time, they set it to where the policy would not come into effect until January of 2022, which would give everybody a full 12 months to use those extra hours for vacation time if they wanted to. So, if they wanted to use them, they could. Then in January of 2023, which is when we rolled everything over, anything over that 160 hours would roll into sick time to be used for state retirement. The employee doesn't lose any hours; it just goes into a different, and they get the benefit of a different way. So Chad had sent out a notice this January just to let everybody know. Got these extra. Use them or they're going to be rolled the next year. And so that notice raised some important questions. One centered around the language in the provision itself, that it wasn't clear that sick time would only be used in calculating retirement, while vacation time was paid when the employee leaves for any reason. So the resolution we brought you last time was just to clear up that language and make it less confusing, that if your sick time or your vacation time is rolling over in your sick time, and if that's to be to your benefit, counting towards your retirement, as opposed to being paid out if you were to get retired. Okay, so the next question that was brought up was the employee raised concern that 12-hour shift employees would lose more days in the rollover than those that work 8-hour shifts. The employee will still earn the same amount of vacation hours each year and be able to carry over a full year's earnings going forward, so 160 hours. We calculate vacation time by hours earned, we pay out vacation time by hours earned, the state calculates its retirement by hours, not days. You know, a work week's different for different jobs. Somebody who works a 12-hour shift is probably only gonna work 3 days a week. Somebody who works 8-hour shift is gonna work 5 days a week. So, but you're gonna lose, if you take a 4 weeks vacation, you're essentially going to lose the same amount of hours out of your vacation bank. Whether you're 312s or. So, you know, we understand that, you know, when we look at it and calculate it in terms of days instead of hours, it might look like, well, it takes 4 hours to get my day, but you don't have 2 other days of work. It's the same time in hours. You got anything? Well, I mean, and I know this, again, is a lot of information, but we were just trying to figure out ways as this group of employees transitions out of working for the town, that we're saving money, any way, you know, that we can, without, you know, stripping anybody of their benefit, but still, we will have a lot of money to pay out in those benefits for that group over a period of time.
We're out for this group here, so we're trying to look out for this.
Yeah, there's a couple of you in here right now.
So, you know, what we brought back was what we brought before, which was the fair language. But this is the town's policy to update or change, the council's policy to update or change in the way they want. If you want to revert back to everybody gets to switch over 240 every year, obviously you can do that. Or you can leave it where it is now, and this one time, anybody who's got over 160 hours fine next year, and it may not be a full 80 hours, but anybody that does, but if they don't use it during this year.
So what you're saying, it will be better for employees and the town.
Well, I feel like it would be, I mean, I feel like if you could say, hey, I rolled this over and this is 10 months added on to my state retirement count, you know, so that you could either retire earlier or you get some up. Once you get to a year in the benefits you get from the state retirement. I'll to be completely transparent, it's a cost shift, shifting some of this burden from the town over to the state on a one-time basis.
It's 10 days.
So you as an employee think it would be better for you to,
All right, Billy, no, I'm still on the side. I mean, I gotta look out for the money. And so it was just an easy way to save some money and not hurt any, you know, I mean, it's not a big deal. We don't know if you take that many hours normally. I mean, you're right, we could, but we don't. There's no way you can.
That was gonna be my question. As a general thing, do people rather have a vacation or rather have time at the end? Have you got a feel for that?
Well, like I was telling you, at this point in time, if you're looking in ways that you retire earlier, you know, I mean, you had it, you're banking the days at the end to get there a little quicker. And she's right, it takes, I mean, I have to work 10 months longer to actually have that 2 weeks of that sick time, those 10 days. And
I mean, at my work, we've got 3 people that never take a day, and I burn mine as fast as I can take it.
Well, and we have some of that, but there's nobody that's taken 400 days a year. And it would be in 80 plus 80 days for that. I mean, it would be really hard. That's like a week a month. It'd be really hard to run the town
Right.
if you had somebody who's taking that much time.
Yeah, it's-
So, because every time they're out, somebody's got to fill their shift, and that's typically overtime.
And then you're paying overtime for it.
Then you're paying overtime.
when you're looking at these four people sitting here, I mean, we're rolling over. I mean, aren't you afraid it's changing time?
Well, it makes it, you know, if you banked your time and you got almost to retirement, didn't have enough and then had to go out, then you could, with that banked time, you could have a time to retire, right?
Like
could
if you had a
use it.
heart attack or.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, it's not counting how many days of personal leave that you get and sick, the sick time we have with the town.
I mean, you could have a wife get sick, all those things
but you'd, and then you.
at the end of your career.
You'd have the hours and the days banked.
Is you saying in vacation or are you saying to retire?
I'm saying like if you were an employee and you get almost to retirement time and something happens that you can't go on, if you had that bank, you could use that to get your full time, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Cool.
yes, if it's work, yes.
Yeah.
Service
Towards
service.
Yeah.
that is actually basically asking how anybody retires is how much sick time you
Yeah.
have. And
There
they
was-
take that into account as time, as credit service.
Yeah, there was a guy at the prison the other day that left 3 years early on his sick time. And he left at 27 years because he had so much time built up.
We don't have many people who are in that situation, but you would have some that would be, that could get, you know,
By grace.
6, 7.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking for a year or so to go out with. I mean, I take it, I mean, I've worked here while my kids were small and I've taken my vacation. I remember the sick time.
And I think that's probably the issue where you're at in life. Get toward the end, you're trying to save it up. When you're young, you want to burn it up.
But, you know, I have to say, it's coming from the private sector and self-employed, you know, that having that benefit it's very nice to have actual vacation. A lot of places that don't. You get so many days a year and you use them or you lose them. And you don't get to roll in it. So, you know, but still, you could roll to 160 hours over if you didn't take a vacation. That's not, let's leave that.
I mean, it's a little.
Yeah.
And for,
And they're still receiving their,
Now, that's when you get, of course, to that 10-year.
But you, I mean, I did the calculation, there's a lot of people, it's already 10 years ago. And if you've got all the people that are retired 10 years and you had to pay that out, that just is a little bit of cost. You will have to pay at the end. Because when you start figuring that into their payroll and their FICA and stuff, it's pretty expensive. And that was all it was.
So that was the reason.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the employees won't lose anything. It just rolls over into a different, into something else.
Day, if it rolls over, yes.
Right, but I mean, it rolls over into the retirement
Yeah.
part of
Into
the
that
benefit
state.
at the end of your employment, correct?
Yes, it'll be less money that goes on that last check, but it'll be more money that goes or, you know, that'll go in the final pot to be very understood on the bank.
For review.
For
And I think since we had, I gave the chat some the notice as well, we've had the two.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure that it was discussed, but we haven't had, and there's not been flood of people at our doors saying, hey, this is, they don't want this. Because they do have issues to use, it. They want to, whatever they've got. And they gain hours every pay period. So it's not like it's January 1, everybody starts out with 160 hour many, it's each pay period you have accrued.
Brady accrued 20. January. I don't remember
But it was right.
that. Right. Like, if I remember, they did make sure I plugged that in, they had to plug in hours in.
So, you know, whatever you all want, I mean, you've already made this change, but it's a policy, it's not a law, it's a policy. You can reverse it. Or you can amend it, which is what we brought forward the last time, to make it clear to everybody that this benefit only accrues once you have retired.
And remind me too, please, say an employee, is sick one day. He or she can use that sick pay for that one day, right? It doesn't have to be like you're sick for 3 days, then your sick pay rolls in. No, okay.
Or if it's a couple hours, you go to meetings, you go to.
Yeah, personal leave time, yeah. But that's a totally separate part.
Okay.
So if you had, yeah, well, doctor dentist usually it's on sick, but if say you had,
If it's still for.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
then you get so many hours every pay period too.
So there's lots of ways that employees can use their benefit days along the
If
year.
somebody, if
So
somebody doesn't have some of the newer employees that don't have a lot of time, they have some other employees that have a lot of time,
Mhm.
Sure.
share it with them.
Have to be vacation.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the sick time also is not necessarily just for you personally, it's like Leslie said, if your child is sick, you know.
Well, there's so many things, spouse, parental. Yeah, so if we take no action, it stays as it is.
Yes. If you take no action, it stays as it is, but then there's still that issue where you did have an employee that it's a little bit confusing.
Did y'all have an opportunity to talk to that employee?
I think he's still.
Can we table it till next time to make sure everybody understands it all the way as employees, or do we need to move forward to?
Well, you just had the one. Is that all?
And that was, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was more of the 12-hour versus the 8-hour.
Oh.
Looking at it in days instead of,
As
as opposed to hours.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just keep
You know,
moving
it's-
forward, you know.
The majority of our is, you know, like that's.
Right.
Mhm.
I mean, you basically got the officers that are 12 hours.
Yep.
But that, you know, they have,
And some of
Two.
them are.
Yeah. but they'll have, you know, 2 days off in the work week where the 8-hour employees don't.
Certainly, I mean, we can table it and go back and have an additional conversation about it.
Well, if it's only one, I don't see any need of that. If you've already had the conversation.
Just make a motion to move forward.
Do you have any thoughts on the chief?
I'm sorry, I missed.
Just
Why
about.
were you texting down there?
Conversation.
Well,
Heard it more than once.
I mean,
from both sides.
just, I mean, with him being the chief, I mean, obviously, most of this is gonna come from his department if there is any complaints, just the 12 versus the 8, our employees.
And again, I see that's, and you can go into, that could be a whole broader topic about vacation days, and holidays and all those kinds of things. You have to have a standard. Our standard is kind of everybody in town earns 8 hours of sick time, and then you earn, so many hours per pay period. You have to have some standard. If you start crossing over between hours and days, I think there are some, maybe an employer or two that have worked 10-hour days. If you're trying to finagle and try to get something with each situation, it's gonna be impossible for finance to keep up with. At the moment, everybody earns, you earn so many hours per pay period. Some people work more days a week than others do, and maybe, be trying to calculate it by how many days of vacation I have and say, well, I get less days. That's not exactly, you also have to work less days, so you'd have to take less.
Is their schedule 36 hours or 48 hours?
We work at St. DuPont, so 1 week is.
36,
it's
48.
week. 1 week is more hours, 1 week is like, if, one of my guys, if they wanted to take 7 days off, they could, if they schedule it on the week that they're working a short week, they use 24 hours of vacation and they're out for 7 days. That's just the way it works.
Right.
If it falls on the other, then they have to take a few more hours. But in the end, by the time a year rolls around, it's all pretty evened out, I feel like.
I mean, we've done it for 30 years with 24s. I mean, it's the same thing except double. I think it's time to move on. Mike.
Betty says we move on. So we need to.
Well, so
take-
there was actually two. There was one this about that, and then there was the others about the holidays, just removing the list. We followed the same.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
holiday.
kind of messed up.
Yeah, no, that's okay. We follow the state holiday. As far as the item, also vacation leave. But so there's a list in our personnel policy about holidays, like what holidays. We follow the state plan. Sometimes that doesn't correlate with the list that's in there. It's not, they're the same holiday, but the number of days, like Christmas on a weekend, you get 3 days, the state gets 3 days. So we want that to match up.
Craft fair, the only place that blows up. Yeah.
Yeah, they take a vacation day then.
Basically, there were 2 different provisions in that one resolution. One was to remove that list and just say, we do it state. Which is, I think, what the county does also. And then the other was this issue about closing time. Or changing it to say, you don't get that benefit for the return, for the role of the vacation or whatever, until you retire. Because of your retirement.
And I think when we wrote that policy, we meant for those vacation days to be the same as the state. So,
Yes.
yeah, that's good.
Well, it says that they are the same.
Yeah, and then that's listed, yeah.
It's a carryover from previous.
Well, we got a little wild on some of that stuff, so. I'm good
We
with,
need a motion to
do we
approve.
need, I'll second it.
All in favor?
Okay, I got one more thing. The tax report. I emailed that to you guys, as of March 1st, we collected all but $56,588.52 for the 2021 levy. Advertisement of delinquent accounts will go into the paper, I think it's March 23rd, March 25th, whatever that Wednesday is, that last week of March. And we have been going through a variety of collection options for that. I think you have till March 8th to be able to, name from going into the paper.
Thank you, Heather, for a very long report.
That was good, Heather.
Yeah, yes, I was like, that's under Chad, that's under Chad. So, we appreciate you, Chad. We'll move on to Leslie now.
In your packet, there was that resolution just covered in blank days. The other portion of that where we make some clarity with language and discussions about. This actually had just a couple minor, so that they hear paid out, it didn't sound like some sort of transfer. So those were also made. The next one was the Bible district. She did a pretty good job of that. Then we've recently been working with VH Transportation Planning out, to help them coordinate all this, get stuff to them, help go through the 3 phases of this, and expecting them to be 3 phases. The first one's assessing our existing conditions, prioritizing the projects, and developing the implementation plan. She mentioned that the first meeting's coming up 25th. Third item is employee evaluation. This is all stuff. Yes. We have made updates to those evaluations. We've put some effort out there to make them more of a 2-way conversation, as opposed, and sort of like a planning, as opposed to just kind of a one-way assessment. The employee just hears criticism. It's something that's maybe a little more productive. So we've got those updated, and those are going out to department heads. We hope to have all those done by the end of March, except for Heather, you all, that we can get those to you all ahead of time. And we thought it might be convenient if we maybe do that in closed session at the regular board meetings. That's convenient. Do it regular, April 7th. That's what I'll be together. Just go over on.
Sounds good with me.
Yeah, that sounds good.
But that closed session next time, and that's all.
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Under Chad's report, yep, it was on there, it's just under his report.
Next time you can do mine.
Thank you.
Shane's up next. Are you interested in doing his?
She can if you want.
Sorry, Shane.
Oh, sorry.
Let me ask one question. On that tax report, there
Yes.
were some years gone by.
Yes,
Are we taking any action toward any of that money?
yes.
Okay, because
We're trying.
that's some substantial.
Everything is personal property.
All right.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
That's part of the plan we're planning. Is how we can address
That's pretty good pot of change.
And some of it is in a state, some of the people have payment plans are ongoing, so.
Yeah, because the county, county enacted that thing where you can make payments on it. And it seemed like we picked up some money there.
We have a lot of payment plans that do well.
As long as
We
they're
know
local.
all our collection rate
Oh.
annually is around over 99.
90, yeah. Yeah, it's great.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, Mr. Dale.
Heather outdo mine because there's nothing listed, so I guess what I've got to talk to y'all about is, the sewer plant down there. As you know, the 500,000 gallon plant, we've got an issue going on down there. We've got a pump and everything set up. That is keeping everything functioning in that sewer plant. It's not a perfect scenario, but it's working. It's keeping everything in the tolerances that it needs to be. Top two contractor about getting the gear drive to go back in on the pipe plant to get it back up and going. I guess I'm gonna have to get your all's approval to get this done because the cost of that gear drive is pretty substantial to the tune of about $47,000.
Whoa.
Yeah, and that's on 12-week lead time. We can push it to a 9-week lead time for 51.5.
How much we paying for pumps?
Well, I was getting ready to give you that. Right now, with the pump issue that we're using and everything down there, it's roughly around $2,500 to $3,000. I can't give you an exact estimate because there was some trip charges in there bringing some stuff, but you're gonna be in the $3,000. So
Basically
you
a
got-
wash if you,
it is for the most part. And another thing that is gonna add a little factor to it is you're getting ready to start getting into the warmer months. So we don't know exactly how that's gonna affect our little operation that we've got set up. So if we can avoid any penalties or NOVs, anything of that nature, and maybe push this thing 4 to 9 weeks, that may be a better alternative. $4,500 more dollars. The other thing to this is we are trying to get another bid. I don't know that it's gonna be a drastic amount of difference. I'm sure there'll probably be somewhat of difference there. But the contractor, he went through Clearwater Incorporated, I believe is the company that he was using to get a bid. West Tech is basically one of the largest manufacturers of these gear drives. Apparently, they're about the only manufacturer out there of these gear drives. I think they are a couple more, and he is trying to give us another quote. I kind of feel that we're probably gonna be in the same range. So I guess you all give approval that we can go ahead and spend this money. I guess Leslie will be talking to you about a budget for this. I kind of figure we're gonna be in that $50,000 mark somewhere right in there, any way that we go. This is the quote that we have now, like I said, we're working on trying to get another one. And that's where we're at.
how long, so those pumps running, how much is the pump running?
When they are down there, they're cutting them off, let them set for a while, let that sludge build up in there a little bit and fire back up. They're probably running. If they let them set down 2 hours and run, you're probably looking at 7, 8 hours run time, maybe more along the lines of about 6 hours of run time with the pump.
Are those diesel pumps? Well, one thing you might want to take into consideration, fuel, the way it's going up, there may be an increase in the price of those pumps.
Right.
So I think, you know, if we're going to do this, we probably need to go ahead and try to shoot for the 9-week.
I think it's the smartest idea. I mean, in all reality, because you're gonna cut a month out there, that's gonna save you $3,000 roughly on that pump. So, I mean, that pays for part of that $4,500. Well,
What's the time frame on the other quote, Shane? Were they able to give you?
I don't know. I talked to him and he's gonna try to get something. It's 12 weeks with this one, and I'm sure it's probably gonna be the same way because whoever else he goes through is probably gonna be calling West Tech and getting a price. So I can't see that any of this is gonna change a drastic amount.
Right.
But from the time we sign this, it's 12-week or a 9-week, whichever route that we want to go. But I'll probably try to touch base with them again tomorrow, see if they have heard anything.
Good.
It go, if obviously we get a lower quote, it goes a lower. As long as it's. Quality. Part of it is that what we have out there, they don't make.
They don't, and another thing that adds a little problem to this is they're building this gear drive to fit the sweep and the shaft and everything, you know, to make it work with our plant, basically. Instead of, you know, in the best case scenario, you're building the sweep, you're building the whole 9 yards, gear drive on top of it, you've got all these specs, you're good to go. Now they're just trying to make something work for us.
Was that price installed?
No,
So that's just the parts.
when I talked to Nathan Booth, yes, that is just the parts right there. That's the parts and it being shipped and getting here. You're looking at, what do we say, I think 3,500, somewhere in that neighborhood for the installation. And getting it set up correctly the way it's supposed to be set up.
Is that our employees leased?
It's contract.
Contract.
They don't look at it.
Yeah.
And seems to be pretty good at it, because apparently he does a lot of work out there at Waynesville.
Well, it don't sound like we have any choice, but I guess the question is, if you want to go with the 9 weeks or 12 weeks, it'd be my recommendation to go with the 9, just because, you know, to get it done. And I mean, the way fuel's coming up, you're probably gonna get a price increase on them pumps.
Yeah.
Make a motion, we go with yours then.
9 weeks, I'll second.
All in favor?
I guess all I'm going.
Thanks, Shane.
We might as well get that budget amendment out there.
Moving on to Ms. Leslie.
All right, so Chad handed out the budget, early budget amendment, and when we were talking about this, I wanted to tell you all, I did 66,000, because I took the people for the actual gear drive, and it was $2,800 this month for those island pumps. And I did, so I've already paid 1 month, just paid it today. Then there's another 3 months probably that will be on it. I didn't allow for fuel because we'll string down a fuel line and that's gonna be.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're just doing 5-gallon jugs and hitting me out of there.
And then I put the $3,500 for the installation. So it's 66,000. When you do all that with it, might be a little over. Hopefully we can get back to that. So, and they do that,
I make a motion.
Second. All in favor?
Well, and then, we have a water break. We had 2 customers that, were actually inside the city limit they had named, the county had figured out, and they have been paying outside water rates. Yeah, so, one we've done a refund for already, and one, they wanted to apply towards their taxes. So what I'm gonna do is just write a check to the payment and let Jackie apply to their taxes. It's about $1,211. It's not a, not a huge deal, but we need a motion for you to approve me to actually do that.
Motion to approve.
No, second.
All right. It's budget season. I mean, we just got done with 5 weeks. Roll on. I've got the worksheet out to department heads, and so we're gonna give them more time to actually work on that. Heather and I'll be meeting with them hopefully the end of this month, 21st or so that week. And hopefully we'll be done and be ready for you guys to do a workstation. The end of April, that last week of April. Everybody looking if there's a day that works best for them.
Monday
Yeah,
is
we can-
always real good for me.
Mondays works good for you, is that right?
I can adjust though if the majority doesn't want Monday.
Okay, well, how does the 25th look?
I'll second that motion.
So it's okay for you on the weekend?
Yeah, for that whole week you get a home.
April the 25th. I'm good
that
at
okay
time.
We'll make it.
What time? Yeah. We can do it evening.
Morning.
I'm open to
Then-
whatever.
Get up, do
I attend awful early, but I can try.
You gonna make it at 11?
No, 10's good. I'm kidding. Kinda,
Same guy.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know. it's-
Oh. Since, what's typical? 4 hours, 6 hours?
No,
It
depends.
You'll have all the information ahead of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we were done by 1 last time. We started at 10 or maybe by 12.
It's not that bad. It used to be really bad.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Okay. So just block out 10 to 1.
Maybe 10 to 2, just to be fair.
Okay.
Is that all you have?
It's all you have.
Thank you, Lizzie.
You're welcome.
Move on to Chief Hal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You have a monthly update from the fire department and see that running pretty typical, the spread of calls and different varieties is pretty much the same. We are running a little bit higher rate. I think the last couple of months, we usually average about 34 calls a month. We've been up in the 40s for the last couple of months. That trend looks like it's going to continue for a little bit. Just to kind of update you on some things that have been happening, with some good news. As many of you know, about the time that we're closing on the new building, we also had our inspection coming up from the state. The insurance commissioner and the state fire marshal are required to routinely inspect the state's 1,520 fire districts. And as part of that, they use a device called the North Carolina Response Rating System. And that rating system is a system that ranges from 1, which is the highest rating, to 10, which means that they're not recognized as a certified fire department by the state. Most of the rural departments in the state are what called 9S category. These ratings don't necessarily mean that there's poor service, or a high rating doesn't mean that the department's overall better equipped to respond to fires, but it does mean that there's been a lot of work trying to improve in the fire. The impact that these ratings have is that higher ratings, which are lower numbers, are a significant cost savings to homeowners on their insurance rates in those respective fire districts. We did have our inspection last November, and when the inspector was here, he said it'd probably take 90 days, and he was right. It was just about to the day now. We got a report back, and I just want to share a little bit of some letters that were sent to both Heather and one to Neil Curry, who is the county fire marshal, just to tell you the results of that inspection. It says we've completed our evaluation of the fire insurance classification for Burnsville Fire District, and advised that the protection class is a 4, formerly class 5. Ratings on dwellings, including those insured under homeowner policies, are established by the North Carolina Rate Bureau. We're advising them to change. The rate change will be effective on Wednesday, June the 1st. The purpose of our visit was to gather information needed to determine fire insurance classification, which may be used in the calculation of property insurance premiums. The survey was not conducted for property loss prevention or life safety purposes, and no life safety or property loss prevention recommendations will be made. The class 4 applies to properties with a fire flow of 3,500 gallons per minute or less. The private and public protection properties with larger needed fire flows are individually evaluated and may vary from the class 4 classification. And just to summarize that for you a little bit, the class 4 inside the city limits applies to all properties in the city limits. So there's going to be some reduction in homeowners insurance, I hope, because of that. So that was good news. And as far as the rural district goes, in which we contract with the county for. That rating also went from a 5/9E to a 4/9E, which means those folks who are have a fire flow of less than 3,500 gallons per minute and are within 5 miles of the fire station and within 1,000 feet of a fire hydrant, we'll get that 4 rating, and those outside of those parameters will be a 9E. So those folks that have the advantage of being close to a fire hydrant will get some off in their premiums as well. And that was good news. I'm sort of hoping we'd stay the same, but we got to go up a little bit, so that's even better news. So I'm glad to let you know that. So there will be a press release in the paper this week that saying a little bit about that, just to give you some idea what that means. The state has 1,520 fire districts. There are only 180 fire districts in the state that are classed higher than the commercial fire. So, and to let you feel even a little bit better, 2 of the fire departments in the county are rated 4, class 4. So that's pretty good, common for the.
South Dakota, you good?
South Dakota's a 4. You're down at the 5. People are working.
Yeah. It can be counted on tankers too, right?
Yeah.
If you
That
got
makes a
enough
big
water.
difference, and a lot of things go into this. One of our biggest assets, I can brag on the town itself, is our water supply. It's what really carries us into those lower classifications, is we've got a tremendous water supply. To be a gravity type system, our flows on our hydrants are really outstanding. So that's a blessing we have. Yeah.
Just a bird of law.
Yes, it does.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. Move on to Chief Buchanan. Police Department update.
Talk about the bike and pedestrian, no, wait, that's. I just have a couple quick updates. I passed out our activity log from the police department. The one update I would have, we did meet yesterday with the IDAX lab people from Appalachia to see their concepts and designs going forward for potential for that, for the old fire department, about a remodel, and Judy's able to join us, but they are supposed to be sending us those plans. So if anyone wants to take a look at what their ideas and concepts are, we haven't received those yet. We're supposed to get them and kind of meet as a group next week and kind of go over and see what we liked and what we didn't like, and for a follow-up. So they've been working very hard. It's a very outstanding group of kids. They're the things that they're producing. A lot of good ideas, a lot of use for that space that I didn't think that place was quite that big.
I was impressed.
They were able to accomplish for that space. As far as zoning and code enforcement, quickly, the one thing I wanted to mention, the planning board did also consider a development project for 676 West Main Street, which is going to be the future Taco Bell. Planning board did make a recommendation with some conditions. I have heard back from the developer about some changes they've made to try to meet those conditions. They have to clear those through corporate, so they're in that process. But assuming they hear back from that, I'll be issuing those permits, and that development will start pretty soon, I'm imagining. And that's going to be the property where the Heritage Science Center was previously. That's all the update I have. Unless anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Brian. All right, moving on to Mr. Corbin, for the town center update.
So everything looks pretty good right now. We're doing better on events. In this month and the next month, we have about 23 events each month, which is higher than normal. We've been having 17 to 18 events each month. We have 4 potential concerts coming up. One of them is not locked in yet, but in April, we have an evening of bluegrass. I think I mentioned that last month. That's with Ollie Blaylock, Barry Nicholson, Mark Fred, and Lee Jones. Then in May, we have Willie Wills and Blue Ridge Mountain Grass. June, that's the date it's not canceled yet, or canceled. And then in July, we have Bumpkin Turnpike. They come back about every year. So we're getting some youth back in here, which is what we really want. Staying really booked up with a lot of weddings, those are really consistent right now. And other than that, I don't have a whole lot else. We're gonna go getting a lot of, right now, we're booking. Not much public speakers, so I saw about all of the big ups.
Thank you, Corbin. You done a fine job.
You guys have any questions about what answer?
Question for Corbin? All right, council member reports. Anybody have anything? Report?
Not really a report, but all our streets coming into Main Street, is it the businesses or the town's responsibility for all the bushes? Dan's on the bypass, I'm on Main Street. I've like got killed about 4 times. And especially at George Watson's, that TD Bank, all them bushes down there. Is that their responsibility to trim back or ours?
If it's on the private property owners.
So do we have any kind of jurisdiction ordinances or anything that says, hey, this is getting crazy?
I can look into that to see what we have to regulate that. If you just let me know the Beatrice in particular areas to look at.
Yeah, there, west over, not, what scares me is the fire truck. Cause there's no way that you get out in the road and see that now that you come into Main Street. And then for some reason, and I don't know why, West Glendale is crazy. I don't know if it's Isaac's Bank. And they have to get so far out there as people's attention.
They do.
Yeah, and the other place, is can the police department work on this intersection just a little bit about making people stop signs, red lights? It is crazy. If you sit over here and watch everybody, nobody stops coming out of CVS. Or Burger King, I guess. CVS has got the right of way, nobody stops. It's just some stuff we need to look at. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'd like to, yes, I guess it's kind of open area here where you can discuss things, but if it's okay with the council, I'd like to ask that, maybe if these girls, this girls' basketball team goes to the state, which I feel like pretty confident that they're going to, if we might, I'm sure the county's gonna do something, but if maybe the police department, fire department could help, through the city limits with an escort. I think it'd be real nice. I know Mitchell done that with their football team. I'm sure the county will probably take them to the county line, but if that's something that Niles, Ryan can do it. But maybe get a fire truck in it or something, but, I think it'd be very nice if we can.
Send them off.
If they do go, we could give them a nice send off. That's something that don't happen a whole lot here. They've done a phenomenal job over the past few years.
We did some stuff on the square with the football team staging, which we had those balloon things. And everybody sent me with those, the kids did. Pictures and stuff like that. So I think we can live in our community promotions fund, all the time, maybe do some decoration on the square and stuff.
No.
It's a good idea.
Any other council members have what to say? Or? All right, Mr. Jamie McMahon, move on to you, sir.
Mayor, council, your manager gave a great thorough explanation of a lot of ARPA-related infrastructure details, even though you guys understand the enthusiasm and the momentum because you carry on over to
It's the, well, next week is. I
won't take up too much of your time, but to your question, Mr. Mayor, about the remaining $10 million of infrastructure funding for water and sewer projects, we'll give you a little overview of sort of what I would call ARPA to the sequel. The county applied for, in addition to the allocation from the state government of the $10 million we applied to and received from the Dogwood Health Trust through their ARPA enhancement grant program, $2.5 million for housing and infrastructure development. So the way we're spending that $2.5 million
The 2.1 of it has been set aside in a residential infrastructure fund, which the county will administer to allow for developers of residential projects that can be connected to the town's public water and sewer, that those connections be paid for, assuming that those developers provide at least 20% of those units would be to folks who qualify for FHA subsidized housing. In addition to that, the remainder of that money was funded, appropriated to fund two different studies. One is a housing assessment. Heather and I had a long conversation about, how we want to try to tackle getting our heads around the housing issue, where housing is going to go, how residential development is going to go among all sectors, not just affordable housing, but market housing as well. So we put out an RFP to solicit a housing research firm to provide a comprehensive assessment, make some recommendations to us about how the local governments here can work to incentivize residential development in a way that we find consistent with the growth goals that the county and town have. The other thing that we funded out of that is actually an infrastructure master plan, as I would call it. We call it an infrastructure analysis and plan, but basically that's what it is. Come in and look at how best to deploy that $10 million. I think, certainly all agree between county and town, and certainly from the EDC's point of view, that planning for growth, addressing concerns that we have about volume and capacity and expansion of service is how we want to deploy that $10 million. So we put out an RFQ to solicit engineering firms to provide that engineering master planning scope of work for us. Both of those, the RFP for the housing study and the RFQ for the engineering work, came back last week. I think Lynn and I, Heather and Shane scheduled a meeting to review those and assess the responses, and then Heather would make a recommendation from the town's point of view on that engineering procurement, which the county will actually execute the contract for. So we hope to have an engineering firm on hand so we can take an exhaustive look at what your capital improvement plan is, what your asset management plan says, where we see growth, where we see commercial growth going, and try to address the residential concerns that we've got, and then figure out how the best way to spend that $10 million is on those projects that Heather mentioned, that we'll then go to DEQ and ask for those to be funded as they're identified. So I thought, since you'd asked that question earlier, that is how we want to address trying to figure out what the wisest way to spend that additional $10 million is, and then any other money that we might be able to access to.
Would there be any restrictions, Jamie or Heather, if you guys done a project that you might turn over to the town? I know that the county's not in the.
Right, and that's one reason that even in procuring the engineering services to do this work, that we wanted to align really directly with what your goals are. Basically, we are looking at deploying this infrastructure in unserved areas, which would mean what's the most cost-effective way to do that. And there may be other funding mechanisms that are out there, if we think creatively about how to access those, that we might be able to draw down. The county might be able to access it. You could, similar to the way that the East Yancey Water and Sewer District was established and funded. So hopefully, as part and parcel of this study, we'll identify what we need to do, what the cost of those improvements are, and then some scenarios for additional funding if we want to spend more than the $10 million that we have. So that's just my addition to the ARPA conversation. It's ARPA. I agree with that.
That's a buzzword.
It is. But unless you guys have any other questions for me that people have not shared. Good to see y'all.
Thank you,
Jamie. All right, Mr. Christie, Chamber. I've got to make a phone call. I have a busy child.
Wow. Thanks again for having me. Just update on what we're doing. I've got a reporter in from WRAL next week who's going to be doing 3 stories on Burnsville. So we'll be getting coverage. I don't know when those will air, but I'll keep everybody posted on They'll be doing a story on Mount Mitchell, Dr. Elijah Mitchell, kind of a background story on that, a story on the sundial, and then one on John Richards. And he is an artist here in town and owns Yummy Mud Puddle. So I've also worked on pitching some other things. So hopefully maybe he'll do even more on Burnsville. Next, that same evening, Jamie and EDC is partnering with me to host a remote worker networking event at Home Place. That's the 10th of March. And we're doing business after hours on the 17th. I do have cellular. You're all invited to that, of course. And then we have our business breakfast on the 24th here at Town Center. Welcome to come to that as well. I think Mr. Dave McIntosh is going to be talking about that one. Yes, I thought so. About, I think, all-terrain vehicles on streets. Exactly. Yes, and Burnsville Candle Company will be sponsoring that as well. Besides that, I'm working on a repeat of the chamber Easter egg hunt that we did last year. So
It's always scheduled on your site.
Pardon?
Is that schedule on your site?
It is. All those events are on my site, and they do come out in my e-newsletter that goes out every Friday. If you don't get that, give me a holler. Happy to add to my list. But that's kind of in a nutshell what we've got going on right now. Any questions? Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Just keep spinning that out.
There you go. Thanks, Christie. Moving on, Mr. Joe.
So you saw my wife here earlier. She had to go to class, so she wanted to be here to talk because she likes to get you guys right in the face about blood, on the badges and stuff. So I did mention it, okay? But I'm here because March is Red Cross Month, and what does that mean? So in March, we celebrate Red Cross Month by recognizing the people who make our life-saving missions possible. Volunteers like my wife and I, blood donors, many of you, people trained in life-saving skills that give the classes that the Red Cross does, and people that support the Red Cross with their money. So all those who step up and aid others during emergencies. So the Red Cross Month has been an annual tradition since 1943, when President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued the first presidential proclamation to declare March as the Red Cross Month. And he asked that, in quotation marks, people rededicate themselves to the splendid aims and activities of the Red Cross. And so we continue that year after year, and we have a proclamation that we have here to read, and then for the mayor to sign if he would. But the Red Cross mission wouldn't be possible without community heroes. During the Red Cross Month celebration, we honor commitment to support individuals and families in need. Just a couple tidbits here. Today, the Red Cross is powered by 90% volunteers, along with generous financial and blood donors, community partners, and people trained in vital health and safety skills. So the ask is for people to join the Red Cross if you're not already doing something for the Red Cross. That might be volunteering, that might be giving blood, that might be learning some of the life-saving skills and sharing those. And that might be just donating. So there is a day in March that's a certain name to it that's not coming to my mind right now, but it's a day that they really focus on the financial part of giving. So that is what Red Cross March is all about. So I can read the proclamation, or Mayor, if you want to read it, just then we'll sign it. Like the little.
Go ahead, I mean, if you wanna read it, that's
I
fine.
got it right in front of me, so I can do that.
That's fine.
Okay, so, for town of Burnsville, proclamation of American Red Cross Month, March 2022. Whereas the American Red Cross, a humanitarian organization that eases people's suffering during life's emergencies in Burnsville and across the United States and around the world. And whereas the American Red Cross chapter serving Western North Carolina chapter has a long history of helping our neighbors in need by delivering shelter, care, and hope during disasters, making our community safer through its life-saving fallen fire campaign, providing life-saving blood, teaching skills that save lives, and supporting military veterans and their families. And whereas we thank and honor the selfless volunteers, dedicated employees, and generous supporters who make this compassionate work possible. And whereas last year in Western North Carolina, 327 active volunteers responded to 195 local disasters, trained 6,691 people in disaster preparedness, installed 271 smoke alarms, collected more than 24,963 units of blood, and provided 530 services to military members and their families. And whereas people in the community depend upon American Red Cross, whose life-saving mission is powered by the devotion of volunteers, generosity of donors, and partnership of community organizations. Now therefore, Fox, Burnsville, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and laws of the towns of Burnsville and North Carolina, do hereby proclaim March 2022 as Red Cross Month. We dedicate the month of March to all those who support its vital work to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies. For all Americans who support this organization and its noble humanitarian mission. So that's the proclamation. Thanks very much for allowing the Red Cross to come in and be supporting the proclamation.
Thank you, Joe.
And just to let people know, the next blood drive is at the First Baptist Church in Spruce Pine on Tuesday, the 15th of March, 1:30 to 6. So blood is still critically low. The supply is at a decades level that they haven't had in a long time. And so there has been some bump up of donations in the last month or so because COVID is easing, weather is a little better. There was a lot of cancellations because of the weather and COVID. But there's starting to be a little bit of a bump up. At the Battle of the Badges in Asheville last week, they collected 154 pints or units, as they call it, of blood. And that's amazing. And so we do, my wife is going to do something similar at a smaller scale here in the community. So try to get a blood drive. That's all I have. If there's any questions, you can talk to me and we'll later on we can just sign this, get a picture of the Red Cross. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much.
We need to. Red shirt on to the doctor. Make a motion to.
Motion to.
No second.
All in favor? Right, moving on. Bill, do you have anything to report on?
Not much of just pretty much the usual thing. They did have a representative sent from Raleigh up there this last time that to talk about the, whether scaling back the representation or whatever. The one we did the proclamation or whatever, but anyway, it ended up in a very heated conversation. It went on till about 9 o'clock. But I think the guy's still he was trying to convince them that would be better than some of the rest of them. Thought, well, there's no representation for some of the mountain groups, and it was pretty heated there for a while. So I think the guy wants to come back. Hopefully not next time.
We stood our ground, huh? We don't have any closed sessions. Next town council meeting will be April the 7th, 6 p.m. Have a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion.
One second.
Adjourn. Hey.